Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast. I want you to just, imagine your absolute best performer for a second. The one person on your team you implicitly rely on to, save every struggling project, navigate the toughest clients, answer those late-night emails.
Oh, yeah. We all have that one person.
Right. We all know exactly who that is. Well, statistically speaking, they're probably sitting at their desk right now, quietly fantasizing about quitting.
Which is just a terrifying thought for any manager.
It really is. So we have an incredibly targeted deep dive for you today. This is custom tailored to look at the very foundation of how we work. We are unpacking a really comprehensive article from smartkeys.org. It's by Felix Römer, and it's titled Team Resilience Training, Preparing Employees to Thrive in Change.
And it is a fantastic read, honestly.
It's brilliant. And our mission here is highly specific. We want to extract the strategic, actionable insights from this text that modern professionals like you can actually use. We want to figure out how to turn workplace stress from a breaking point into an actual competitive advantage.
Because it's a mission we absolutely have to take seriously. I mean, simply because the current business landscape is flashing red right now. When you look at the data Römer presents in the text, we are seeing a widespread systemic erosion of focus and performance. And this is across almost every industry.
Yeah, I was looking at the scale of the burnout mentioned in the article, and it just paints a really bleak picture of the modern office. I know the piece referenced some major secondary research on how widespread this feeling is, but the Gallup numbers specifically really caught my eye.
Right, the Gallup data is wild.
It is. What is the actual reality on the ground right now with those numbers?
Well, the reality is that the vast majority of the workforce is basically running on fumes. So the Gallup data cited in the text shows that 55% of employees are actively struggling.
Wow, over half.
Over half, yeah. And 11% are outright suffering.
That is just rough.
It really is. And that is paired with secondary research revealing that 76% of people experience burnout sometimes, while 28% feel it often or always.
Over a quarter feel it often or always. That's staggering.
Exactly. And we have to remember, these aren't just, abstract statistics on a page. These are real people. People walking through the office doors or logging onto video calls, completely cognitively depleted before the very first meeting even starts.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because with numbers that high, it feels like an institutional failure.
Oh, absolutely.
But the standard corporate response usually involves giving everyone a free subscription to a meditation app and just telling them to do some deep breathing. Are we really just throwing generic wellness apps at a systemic crisis? Like, what is the actual strategy here?
Well, that tension you just mentioned is exactly why Römer's text is so vital. The entire strategy hinges on moving the focus away from individual coping mechanisms.
Right.
And shifting it entirely toward team resilience. You see, the traditional approach assumes that stress is a personal failing.
Like, it's your fault if you're stressed out. Exactly. The idea is that if an employee is burning out, they just need better time management or, a longer walk on their lunch break. But this text argues that we need a shared operating framework. It's about how the entire unit learns and adapts and grows from pressure rather than just leaving individuals to fend for themselves.
So it is a shift from solo coping to co-creating solutions.
Yes, exactly.
When you put it like that, it makes perfect sense that resilience has to be a team sport. It isn't just this genetic personality trait where you are either, a resilient person or a fragile person.
Right, that's a huge myth.
Yeah. But what does a shared operating framework actually look like in practice?
So it starts with psychological safety and trust. The text brings in Google's famous Project Aristotle for this.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Google spent years studying their most effective groups to figure out what actually made them successful. And they assumed it would be a mix of the highest IQs or the most experienced engineers,
Right. Just put all the smartest people in a room and watch them work.
Exactly. But instead, they found that psychological safety was the absolute bedrock of a high-performing unit. When trust is genuinely present, a team doesn't hide its mistakes out of fear of retribution. They actually surface problems early.
Because they aren't terrified of getting fired for messing up.
Exactly. And Microsoft and other firms have found similar results, actually. Teams with high empathy and emotional intelligence possess a drastically improved ability to adapt to sudden changes.
Let's look at the mechanics of that. If individual resilience is like a single shock absorber on a car, then team resilience is the entire synchronized suspension system.
No, I really like that analogy.
Yeah, think about it. If you are driving and you hit a massive pothole, And all you have is one single shock absorber taking the full weight of the vehicle, well, it's going to snap.
Oh, for sure.
And that is the individual employee burning out. But a great suspension system distributes the impact across the whole vehicle. The car absorbs the shock, it stabilizes, and it never loses momentum.
Right. And what's fascinating here is, taking that analogy a step further, a team's suspension system literally stops the exact same mistakes from repeating.
How do you mean?
Well, when an isolated employee hits a pothole, they might fix their own flat tire, but they don't tell anyone else about the hazard. But when a highly trusting team hits that same pothole, they process the shock together. They create clear norms for decision-making and escalation. And that transforms raw, chaotic stress into a scaling mechanism for solutions.
So you aren't just fixing a localized problem.
Exactly. You are upgrading the entire system's ability to handle that obstacle the next time it appears.
Okay, but a synchronized suspension system doesn't just magically assemble itself. If a company wants to build this, they clearly need a blueprint.
Definitely.
And the text outlines a specific 4-domain curriculum for building team resilience. Let's walk through how an organization actually trains for this, starting with the emotional domain. The article mentions 20 to 30-minute resets. What does an emotional reset actually entail during a regular workday?
It is entirely about self-awareness and regulation, rather than, say, taking a nap or stepping away to just scroll on your phone.
Right, not just zoning out for half an hour.
Exactly. An emotional reset involves guided reflection prompts. It forces an employee to step back from the tactical execution of their job, answering emails, writing code, and objectively assess their cognitive state.
Like asking themselves why they're so stressed out.
Kind of, yeah. Like, are they operating out of panic? Are they communicating defensively? It provides a structured 20-minute window to identify those emotional roadblocks and recalibrate before engaging with the rest of the team.
That makes a lot of sense. Then we move into the mental domain. And the text mentions these rapid solution sprints and reframing drills. How does a solution sprint differ from a regular team meeting where everyone just complains about a problem?
Well, a rapid solution sprint is highly structured to prevent that exact spiral of complaining. Under intense stress, the human brain naturally fixates on the threat, right? The missed deadline, the angry client.
Yeah, it's hard to look away from the fire.
Right. So a solution sprint is a time-boxed exercise where the team is forced to reframe the narrative. For 15 minutes, you are actually not allowed to discuss the problem itself.
Oh, wow. Really? You can't even talk about it?
Yeah, you are only permitted to brainstorm forward-looking, actionable steps. It trains the team's collective brain to automatically pivot from threat analysis to solution generation when pressure hits.
That structural shift sounds incredibly necessary. And then the third area is the social domain. This is about building trust through structured dialogue and buddy systems, I believe.
Yes, exactly. The goal there is to create clear escalation paths so people just don't feel isolated when things get tough.
Okay, and finally, the physical domain. I imagine this isn't about forcing the accounting department to run a marathon together.
Not at all, no. The physical domain is about integrating micro breaks and recovery habits into the workflow to maintain sustained energy.
Like what?
We are talking about hydration prompts, or just standing up for 2 minutes between calls. The text actually points to Siemens Healthineers as a prime example of executing this methodology smartly.
What do they do?
Well, during the extreme pressure of the COVID-19 pandemic, they offered meditation, breathing exercises, and importantly, expressive writing.
Expressive writing. Interesting. Let me play devil's advocate for a second here, though. I am looking at this 4-domain curriculum, and it sounds beautiful in a vacuum.
Sure.
But think about a real business environment. Everyone is constantly putting out fires, dealing with urgent client requests, racing against impossible deadlines.
It's chaotic.
Very. So how do leaders actually fit a rapid solution sprint or an expressive writing session into an already overflowing schedule without causing more stress? Like if my inbox has 200 unread messages, telling me to take 30 minutes to do a reflection prompt is just going to make me panic about the work I'm actively ignoring.
And that is a very fair point. That is actually the most common point of failure for these programs. If you dump a massive multi-day training seminar onto an exhausted workforce, it just completely backfires.
Yeah, I've seen that happen so many times.
Right. But the text explicitly addresses this by advocating for a specific delivery cadence. You have to mix live workshops with microlearning, gamification, and coaching.
So keep it small.
Yes, it must become a daily, low-friction routine. We are talking about maybe 5-minute warm-ups before a pre-existing meeting, or brief peer discussion guides that take 2 minutes to read. The philosophy is integration, not addition.
So you aren't adding to the plate, you're just changing how the plate is arranged.
Beautifully said. You weave the resilience practices into the meetings and workflows that are already happening.
Which brings up a really critical friction point. You can have the most beautifully integrated, gamified micro-learning curriculum in the world, but if your company culture penalizes people for using it, it falls apart.
Oh, completely.
Like, if a manager glares at an employee for taking a 5-minute micro break, the whole curriculum is dead on arrival. So how do leaders actually turn these concepts into daily action?
Well, leaders shape daily norms far more effectively than any HR policy ever will. Leadership habits are the actual delivery mechanism for a resilient culture.
That is a great way to frame it.
Yeah, I mean, if a manager isn't practicing transparency or celebrating small wins or aligning the team on a clear purpose, no amount of expressive writing will save the group. The text uses Intel's OKR's objectives and key results as a baseline for this.
Most people know OKRs as a goal-setting framework, but how does that specifically act as a resilience tool?
Because ambiguity is a massive driver of workplace anxiety. When employees don't know what is expected of them or how their success is being measured, they operate in a constant state of low-level panic.
Right, you're always second-guessing yourself.
Exactly. So by utilizing OKRs, leadership makes progress transparent, measurable, and fair. It removes the guesswork entirely. When the target is clear, the cognitive load required to just exist in the workplace drops significantly.
Which frees up mental bandwidth to handle actual business challenges.
Precisely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let's talk about what happens when those business challenges turn into actual failures. Because the text details some specific leadership routines, and the approach from IBM is absolutely fascinating.
Yes, the blame-free postmortems.
Right. I remember a project launch early in my career that went completely sideways. And the postmortem meeting was just an hour of the vice president trying to figure out whose budget to penalize.
Oh, that sounds horrible.
It was. We all just clammed up, pointed fingers, and tried to survive the hour. No one learned a single thing.
Which is the natural human instinct, right? Self-preservation. When a project fails, real money or time is lost, and the organizational instinct is always to find a scapegoat. And to override that instinct requires extreme discipline from leadership. So IBM runs these short debriefs after milestones or misses, but they completely remove the investigation of who is at fault.
So they don't even ask who did it.
Nope. They focus entirely on capturing experiences to fix the underlying systems.
And the text outlines the specific prompts IBM uses to keep the meeting from devolving into a witch hunt. How do they actually structure that conversation?
They rely on 3 very simple, incredibly disciplined questions. 1, what happened? 2, what signs did we miss? And 3, what will we try next?
Wow, that is simple.
It is. Notice what isn't there. There is no who dropped the ball or why didn't you catch this. By asking what signs did we miss, the leader assumes collective responsibility.
It shifts the focus entirely from litigating the past to engineering a more resilient future.
Exactly.
That ties directly into the other routine the text highlights from Spotify, right?
Yeah.
The squad model and the risk round.
Yes, Spotify's risk rounds are a great example of this.
So from what I understand, Spotify creates these time-boxed sessions where they intentionally pair domain experts with fresh perspectives from outside the immediate team. The entire goal is to surface questions and early warnings before they become massive blockers. By bringing in someone who isn't burdened by the team's internal assumptions, you get a much clearer view of the actual risks.
That cross-functional collaboration is designed specifically to unblock issues fast. The domain expert knows the details, of course. But the outsider asks the simple foundational questions that the experts might be overlooking simply because they are too close to the project.
You can't see the forest for the trees.
Exactly.
So we have the theory, we have the curriculum, and we have the leadership habits like the blame-free postmortems and the risk rounds.
Yeah.
Now we really have to answer the ultimate question every executive listening is going to ask.
The ROI question.
Yes. How does this directly impact the bottom line? Why does this matter for a business trying to stay ahead in a volatile market?
Well, the business impact is a direct reduction in stress-driven errors. When a team operates within a shared, psychologically safe framework, they communicate better.
That makes sense.
And better communication means fewer mistakes. Fewer mistakes mean a drastic reduction in rework.
Which saves a ton of time and money.
Exactly. When you aren't constantly redoing flawed work, you keep your delivery timelines intact, even when the market shifts unexpectedly. You achieve a much steadier, more reliable output.
And beyond the output, there's the retention aspect. Burned out employees leave. Supported employees stay.
Absolutely.
When you retain your workforce, you are preserving vital institutional knowledge. You are also maintaining the deep customer trust that relies on interacting with a consistent, experienced team. Does the article provide any hard numbers on how this impacts employee loyalty?
It does, and the data is highly compelling. The text cites a statistic from the American Heart Association showing that 94% of participants reported a more positive view and a stronger commitment to their employer after engaging in structural resilience programs.
94%. That is a massive retention tool.
It really is.
But to prove that ROI to a skeptical board of directors, you can't just launch a few rapid solution sprints and hope for the best. You have to actually measure it.
Right, you need the hard data.
So how do you track team resilience without just sending out another one of those generic 1 to 5 scale employee surveys that everyone just rushes through on a Friday afternoon?
Well, standard surveys are often lagging indicators. By the time the survey actually shows burnout, it's way too late.
The damage is already done.
Right. So the text outlines a measurement strategy that relies heavily on people analytics. This means looking at the digital footprint and metadata of the organization.
What kind of metadata actually reveals burnout, though? Like, what are they tracking?
It involves tracking things like calendar bloat.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like how many double-booked meetings are your employees subjected to? Or what is the volume of after-hours emails or weekend chat messages? People analytics can reveal these hidden stressors and performance gaps completely objectively. You combine that data with cycle time and productivity metrics to get a real-time picture of organizational health.
I really love how the text frames this idea. It states that measurement itself is a development tool. I mean, think about the check engine light on your car's dashboard.
Oh, great analogy.
When that light comes on, it doesn't mean the car is completely destroyed. And it isn't an insult to your driving skills.
Right.
It is an early diagnostic tool.
Yeah.
It's warning you to check the oil before the engine actually seizes up. Tracking cycle time, escalation rates, and after-hours metadata does the exact same thing for a business. It creates awareness, so the group can make small adjustments before total breakdown occurs.
That early awareness is totally crucial, and the text offers a very practical piece of advice for leaders here. Keep these dashboards simple. Track just 2 to 3 measures per team.
50.
No, if you track 50 different metrics, it just becomes noise. If you track 3, the progress is highly visible and it's easy to act on during quarterly reviews.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground from Felix Römer's insights today. We started with the sheer scale of the burnout crisis, moved through the necessity of a shared suspension system, detailed the 4-domain curriculum, and unpacked how leadership habits actually drive the entire framework.
It's a lot to process, for sure.
It is. So what does this all actually mean for you and your team? The text provides some immediate forward-looking advice. Start small.
Yes, please do.
Do not walk into your office tomorrow and try to overhaul the entire company culture in one day. Pick just one routine to try this week.
That's definitely the best way to do it.
Exactly. Maybe you implement a 10-minute cross-functional risk round, or you try a short 3-question blame-free postmortem after your next project. Try one thing and explicitly invite your group to co-own the process.
And, as you decide which routine to implement first, I actually want to leave you with a question to consider. This builds on the foundational concept of psychological safety we talked about earlier.
Okay, let's hear it.
If Google proved that psychological safety is the absolute key to accelerating problem solving, what critical warnings, hidden flaws, or early risks is your team currently missing, simply because there isn't a safe routine in place to surface them?
Wow. That is a phenomenal question to bring back to your next leadership meeting. Thank you so much for tuning into the SmartKeys podcast. If you found this deep dive valuable, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our future analyses. And I highly encourage you to read Felix Römer's full article, Team Resilience Training Preparing Employees to Thrive and Change. You can find the direct link to the piece right in the show notes. Keep building that resilience, and we'll see you next time.